because I've always had this theory for a number of years now that if One Nation plays their cards right, they really could be the UKIP of Australian politics. Um, UKIP back in the day in Britain, led by Nigel Farage, uh, it was often mistakenly seen as a party for disillusioned Tories. But according to Matthew Goodwin, a political scientist and expert on populism, really, he did an in-depth look at UKIP and their voter base. And actually, the majority of their voter base for UKIP was actually old Labour. There were a type of old Labour voters that weren't socialist, and so they rejected Corbyn, and they rejected the new Labour Blairism and Brownism that took over the party as well, and they were very much politically homeless until UKIP came around. They were the ones that gave Boris Johnson his landslide victory in 2019 with the Red Wall. Um, with One Nation, I can see them representing what I call old school Labour, which kind of rejected the Hawke Keating social reforms and economic as well, and also the Liberal Howard economic reforms as well. And what do you really think One Nation really needs to do to attain mainstream support?
Keep going as we are, because you're correct. Not only did Nigel Farage have the support of workers behind him, he also had the support of small business and other people who were interested in restoring Britain. Trump, because of his policies, when he was in the presidency, he got support from the American workers who had been unionized previously and supported supposedly the Democrats, but they lost. The Democrats lost them to Trump. And also, I understand a lot of the African-American vote in America swung over to Trump, because when it all boils down to it, Daniel, people are interested in their economic future. That's number one. Number two, they're interested in their security. And number three, they're interested in their future, what I would call the productive capacity of the country. They want to make sure their children have a decent future. They want to see people in politics who are concerned about cost of living, taxation, basic economic policies, number one. Number two, security, defense, but also education, because we've abandoned decent education to the woke politics of the United Nations. Security of property rights, that's fundamental. And number three, as I said, the future capacity of our country in terms of infrastructure, roads, dams, bridges, railways, ports, energy. People are now starting to get worried about energy. So that's where we're very strong on the basics. So I think Nigel Farage, it's interesting what's happened to Nigel, because I've met Nigel, and he's a wonderful man, and he's very, very effective, very decent speaker. He came out here, as you know, at CPAC, and he's one of the stars at CPAC. But I noticed that until CPAC, he was somewhat restrained in his comments about the globalists, which are taking over our Western civilization and pushing the destruction of Western civilization quite deliberately. And he was somewhat restrained in calling out the UN. But myself and other people have been calling them out very bluntly. And I think Nigel has seen that. Maybe it's just coincidence, but he's gone back now and he's taking a much firmer stance against the United Nations and he's always been strong against the EU. But interestingly, the EU, according to the United Nations, is the template for global governance that the UN wants to follow. So anyway, so Nigel also took what was good about Britain and started putting it up on a pedestal and shining a light on it. And the people of Britain responded. But so did the Tory party. When Nigel came in with his patriotic views and his conservative views, the Tory party moved to the conservative side yet again. So when he showed that flash of electoral support, a huge electoral support in the local council elections, the Tories then nobbled him at the next federal election. And I can remember Farage talking about Brexit. Who was the Prime Minister and the female Prime Minister? I've forgotten her name. May.
Theresa May, yeah.
Theresa May, yeah, thank you. He basically said to Boris Johnson and the others and the Conservatives, if you're not doing the job about getting out of Brexit properly, then I'll come back to politics. And now he is back in politics, but I don't know that he's absolutely serious about it. But Nigel Farage, what I'm trying to say is Nigel Farage is in touch with what the Britons want. That's why he's popular. He's also a very effective and shrewd politician. He's a very effective speaker, and he can get in touch with people. But the Conservative Party will do a dance to try and nobble his vote in the British Parliament. But I think that the Tories have pretty much lost it after Boris, because Boris betrayed them. So, if he were to stand again, I think he'd do very, very well.
Are we saying Boris standing again, or Nigel?
No, Nigel Farage. No, Boris has been a huge disappointment.
Yes. I always saw Boris as being almost like the Tory party establishment version of Farage. It was sort of like his doppelganger, so to speak. But he's not quite like this, like the real thing. And I think that's what basically stopped Farage really making ingrowing support domestically. I mean, when Theresa May was there, his Brexit party was getting 20% domestic vote. It took someone like Boris to basically copy him and kind of take it away to really stop him. Because besides Boris, there had no one else even pretending to be populist within the Tory party. So, but yeah, I think Boris is basically gone now. I don't really see him come back. And the Reform Party is now, I think, 8, 9, 10% with Richard Tice. But I don't know, as good as that is, Tice still doesn't have the grand personality like a Farage or even a Johnson. And I think people are kind of waiting for Farage to kind of come back yet again, but he seems reluctant.
Yes, I'd agree. That's a very sound summary you've just given us. Boris Johnson was, if we want to be unkind, that we'd call him a fraud. Boris Johnson, if you wanted to be generous, you'd say he lacked depth. But I would put him somewhere in the middle there, because he pretended to be someone who he wasn't. So in that sense, he was a fraud. He pretended to be for Britain, but he wasn't. And he pretended to be a good bloke. And well, maybe he was, but there was all pretense. Whereas I see Nigel as very genuine, very down to earth, a good bloke at the same time, but very astute. So I'm not saying Boris is not intelligent. I'm saying that Boris is not genuine, and Nigel Farage is the real thing. So with Rishi Sunak in place, then it might be a huge opportunity for Nigel Farage, because Rishi is a definite globalist, and Britons are tired of that.
Absolutely.